This is the Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo.
Hello and welcome to the latest Blood Red podcast from the Liverpool Echo. I'm Matt Addison, back on hosting duties once again. And with less than a week to go until the new season begins, excitement is starting to build once more. To get into all the latest Reds talking points, I have alongside me for the latest Blood Red podcast, our Liverpool correspondent, both home and away, Paul Gorst, plus Joe Rimmer and Caoimhe O'Neill. Gorsty, will come to you first. Looking forward to all the football picking up again.
I am, but not in a way that I normally would be, because I think it's just the behind closed doors model is really set in now, isn't it? And it only occurred to me last week that, or rather yesterday, that I normally love that first match of the day of the season, the first one of the season where you see all the new teams in action with the new signings and all that, and all the new kits. And it only dawned on me last night that it's next week, and I was a bit like, oh, well, I suppose there's something to watch then Saturday night and whatever if I'm going to stay in. But yeah, I mean, it's a chance to watch Liverpool in competitive action once again, isn't it? And we can obviously look forward to, well, it's going to be another title challenge and another stage one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to it, but not as much as probably a normally would be. Well, not as much as it was 18 months ago when Liverpool were ready to kick off against Norwich.
Yeah, definitely. It's a big game to start, isn't it, Joe? Leeds United at Anfield. How much are you looking forward to that?
Yeah, big time mixed feelings. I think I've said it quite a few times. Huge admirer of Leeds. Really like them as a football club. Think they're one of the biggest clubs in the country, and I'm really pleased to see them back in the Premier League. I've got good friends who support Leeds, but then again, there'll be no fans there, so it's kind of ruins the occasion a little bit. And I think this would have been a great game later in the season. It'll still be a great game to watch. It'll be fascinating to see what Leeds can do in the Premier League and how they shape up against Liverpool and the two managers facing off. So quite excited about that. But like Gorst, it's not quite the same, is it? I think we've all seen enough of this behind closed doors football now to know that realistically it's just not as fun, is it? It's not as fun. And I think I watched the Champions League final, and that's usually one hell of an occasion, but just doesn't feel like it. So it's a bit of a shame, but yeah, hopefully, fans will be coming back in October, and hopefully by the end of the season, you never know, things might look a bit better. But yeah, still looking forward to seeing what Leeds can do against Liverpool.
Yeah, and Caoimhe O'Neill alongside us as well. How's things over on the other side of the river, Caoimhe? You looking forward to some competitive action after 3 friendlies behind closed doors?
Yeah, do you know what I am? I mean, I'm full of cold at the minute, so the common cold, that's nothing to worry about, is it? But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Other than it'd be great to get to Anfield, wouldn't it? That's what we're all football fans for, to go to the game and go for a drink with your mates and that kind of thing. And I just think that's sort of what people they play football for 90 minutes, but it's a day out, isn't it? And even if you're not getting the game, it's just the whole sort of excitement of the day. And I feel like that's kind of lost when fans aren't able to attend. But, it's as soon as that whistle blows, it's just going to be full on another season of Liverpool, going for the Premier League title again. And it's kind of like a bit scary, and I'm getting my heart's racing a little bit thinking about it. Another one. But hopefully, we get a good result against Leeds, and then we just go for it, because it's a bit of a weird one, isn't it, with all the business Chelsea are doing. You kind of don't know if they're going to absolutely smash it or just be the same as it was last year and have a good run, but not as good as Liverpool. So it's a little bit, are Man City really gonna go for it, or are Liverpool just gonna boss it again? So it's just it's a bit scary thinking of it all, isn't it? We've got to do it though.
Yeah, it's different in many ways, isn't it? Everyone starts the season on 0 points. It's been a long time since Liverpool were level with the rest of those Premier League teams, or anywhere close to them, in fact. But Gorsty, of course, Liverpool did play over the weekend behind closed doors at Anfield. We'll start with a little bit of a touch on the game against Blackpool. We won't go into too much detail because there's been plenty of content on that match across the Blood Red channel over the last couple of days. But it was nice to see the players score a few goals, a little bit of a confidence boost, and would have been important for them to get a few minutes in their legs. Yeah,
definitely. I think just first half Liverpool really struggled and created 1 or 2 half chances, but couldn't really break down Blackpool. Naby Keita was unlucky with one off the post. But it was an interesting team selection, wasn't it? It was kind of like a hybrid between the senior stars with the front three who were still there at Melwood, as was Alisson and Fabinho and Keita. But then you had the likes of Billy Cometio playing a game, and Sepp Vandenberg was obviously part of the 7 players who scored, 7 different scorers, I think, and RB Elliott as well. So it was a bit of a strange one. As I say, I didn't think Liverpool particularly played well first half. Second half, they really came into their own and racked up a bit of a scoreline. I think while Liverpool were obviously the dominant team, I don't think too many expected them to go and knock in 7. But a little bit of a confidence booster going into the new season, as we say, and important minutes for players like Joe Matip, who let's face it, hasn't played at all, has he really? He was involved against Everton. That was his only game post Project Restart, as they call it. So important for quite a few players, and a little bit of a confidence booster going into Saturday. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Takumi Minamino, Joe, probably the biggest talking point from the weekend. Another impressive show from him. How excited are you about him heading into the new season?
Yeah, I've got this is probably jinxing him now, so sorry about this, Takumi. But yeah, I've got a really good feeling about him. I just think he looks bright. He looks quite sharp, and it just seems like they're trying different formations and different ideas to try and find out what's best for him at the moment. And I think it looks like centrally just off forwards is what's best for him. And Liverpool seemed to try that formation on Saturday, and he seemed to do well. He's obviously scored a couple of goals recently. He just looks sharp. Him and Keita for me in pre-season have both been the two that look sharp going into the new season. And it wouldn't surprise me if he starts on Saturday. I think Klopp went for the sort of tried and trusted against Arsenal, and he didn't quite do it. And then when he made the changes in the second half, Liverpool came to life a little bit. And I wonder whether now going into Saturday's game, whether he'll just try and mix it up in 1 or 2 positions. And Minamino's someone that's been pushing, so. It's just interesting to see where he fits in. Obviously, he's been used as an alternative for Firmino quite a lot in the last season and the end of last season, and in pre-season he's been used in a variety of roles. So I wonder whether he'll try that formation that he tried against Blackpool when Minamino seemed to be the most advanced midfielder on Saturday. But yeah, I just think he looks more settled. He looks more confident. He looks like the type of the player that we saw for Salzburg at the end of last year, and that bodes well for Liverpool, because when he came in, he just looked, quite, understandably like someone coming into a whole new team, a new culture, and he looked a little bit playing within himself, and now he looks a lot more confident. So can't wait to see him in action. And yeah, I think we can expect decent things from him. I think it's easy to disregard him as well. People want to talk about signings, and people hate this, don't they? It's like a new signing, but he's coming in, and you expect a lot more from him, don't you? So for Liverpool, he could be a new dimension next season. So hopefully he is. And yeah, good luck to him, because I can't wait to watch him play.
Yeah, he certainly looked a player over the weekend. We're going to talk briefly about centre-backs in just a second, Kiva, but just a quick question really on Billy Koumetio. Obviously, there's been a lot of talk about him. Do you think Saturday maybe showed that he's not quite ready to step in there, and Liverpool might need to dip into the market at some point?
Yeah, I mean, he had such a good pre-season, didn't he? And he made that one mistake, which I think just showed a little lack of experience, which is, obviously going to happen at that age. He's only 17. I mean, in Austria, he was eating headers for breakfast, wasn't he? And, we were all buzzing off him. And, I think he's got those qualities that you can see. So I think that's really promising. We were never going to expect him to be starting games for Liverpool next season, was we? So, I don't think it's a big concern. I think, they were difficult situations. It'll be a great experience for him. Klopp was actually made up with him after the game. He was saying, he played some Super Bowls and was, doing everything that sort of, has been instructed to do. I think he had a couple of private sessions, didn't he, in Austria, and kind of just like one-to-one kind of approach, because obviously Liverpool see something in him, which is, the fans watching those games will see, there's clearly a talented player there. But as I say, you're not expecting him to be starting alongside Van Dijk. But as we've seen in the past, Liverpool's injury woes at centre-half, touch wood, we got lucky last year, but the season before, I think we were down to Van Dijk and Minan, which, wasn't great. But, I think it is a little bit of a worry that Dejan Lovren's left, and you kind of see in the performances he's racking up. And, I've followed Zenit on Twitter, and they're just like Zenit Saint Lovren now, pretty much. Literally everything he does is like going viral. He's, scoring goals winning games for them, keeping clean sheets. And it kind of does make you think Liverpool have lost a really, really experienced veteran defender there. And, we've obviously, it's good to have Matt back. And that was a big bonus at the weekend, just knowing that he's there. Because I think you can probably get by with like your three experienced and, veterans like that. But I mean, we talk about Joe Gomez as though he's 35. He's still a kid himself, really, isn't he? So, you do kind of worry, but maybe can Liverpool get by? A couple of injuries could just completely, get the road could go off, the car could go off the road, couldn't it, really? Because you look at Man City last season and that's where they struggled. That's, I think, where they pretty much lost the league. A few injuries and their centre-half's just not performing to the level that would be expected of, mounting a title challenge. So it is a little bit of a concern, I think, going into the new season. But look, Liverpool have got the best centre-half in the world still in Van Dijk. Gomez is brilliant, Matip's brilliant. There's some good players coming through, whether it's a bit late in the game now to be going out and getting a centre-half. I think it probably is. But, it's open till October the 5th, the transfer market, isn't it? So, if an injury does happen or something, or Klopp thinks, we need to bring in some more experience, I'm sure he'll do that.
Gorsty, I know you wanted to make a point about Billy Karius as well. Obviously, we saw that mistake over the weekend, but what was your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I actually didn't think it was too much of a mistake from him. I thought the ball from Salah was dreadful. Salah kind of drifts in field and takes it to make the pass, and eventually tries the crossfield pass of about 30 yards right along the floor. Didn't put anywhere near enough on it. And then he's put Karius in a world of trouble, a 17-year-old defender who's the last man. And he didn't win the 50-50. And that's where the experience will come into play. He'll know next time that he probably just has to go into that with all of his power and might. And 9 times out of 10, the opposition player will probably take a look at him and think, don't fancy this one. So learning experience. But I don't think that was too much of a huge mistake from Billy Karius. I just thought it was a senior player putting him under a little bit of undue pressure, I think.
Yeah, Joel Matip back, of course, as well, Joe, getting minutes under his belt. How important do you think that'll be for Liverpool? Obviously, we've mentioned the lack of depth in that area of the field, but he's going to be needed over the next few weeks. Yeah,
massively. I mean, it's like a battle that we sort of see it repeating every season now, don't we? The last 2 seasons gone by, Joe Gomez and Matip and Lovren before that battled for the spot alongside Van Dijk, and it looks like it's up for grabs again, doesn't it? I think Matip probably may well be the favourite going into Saturday, having performed quite well over pre-season. So I think his experience will be vital. I think he's quite often overlooked, and I like him. He looks stronger, and he seems to be a threat from set pieces as well, which is good. So again, I think it'll be an interesting battle, because I think Gomez has shown the odd moment of weakness, and obviously he's still learning. But Matip has got that experience, so I wouldn't be surprised if Matip starts on Saturday. Obviously, Liverpool have got a lot of footballs to play in a short space of time again, so I think they will rotate somewhat. But Matip might have edged ahead again.
Yeah, difficult mistake to cope with for Joe Gomez for England over the weekend. So it'll be interesting to see who is picked on Saturday. But we'll move on a little bit from Blackpool now, move on to a more transfer-y theme for the main part of the show. I spoke to football finance expert Kieran Maguire for a podcast that will be released tomorrow, so you can check that out where you got this episode from. And without wanting to give too much away, the long and short of it is that Liverpool's approach really is going to be very sensible for the rest of this summer, as we've been saying now for quite some time. So that might mean an approach of having to sell a few players before they go into the market. That's not just about finances, of course, but about squad size as well. But one player, Gorsty, who has been linked with a move away is Gini Wijnaldum. First of all, how likely do you think it is that Liverpool would allow him to go this summer? And secondly, should they even be contemplating that?
Difficult one, that one, isn't it? Do Liverpool see more value in a season out of him and then him leaving on a free, or do they see it as more profitable to kind of sell him at a knockdown price now and then chase a replacement? It's a really difficult one. I think if you look at the recent history, someone like Emre Can is kind of a little bit of evidence, isn't it? When Liverpool thought if he wasn't signing a new contract, it was better to kind of keep him in the squad and then see him well on a free, because probably what they can get out of him for the season is ultimately more valuable than kind of a knockdown price. So it's a really difficult one, especially when Liverpool kick off the season in less than a week. And no manager wants to do a new season with so many uncertainties hanging over the squad. Managers obviously prefer to have the business done and dusted before the season starts. Obviously, there's still just under a month before the window shuts, but I think Jurgen Klopp would be no different in terms of wanting the squad settled and ready in time for the kickoff. So it's a really, really difficult situation that Liverpool are in at the moment in terms of Wijnaldum. I don't think we've seen a few reports over the weekend suggesting that Liverpool are ready to kind of do business at 15 million. They've just paid nearly 12 there for a reserve left back. So for a player of his importance, I'd be surprised if they were kind of ready to accept that. I think it might be a case of him actually staying put and getting another season out of him, and maybe somewhere along the line of this season trying to kind of thrash out a new contract. But at the moment, it's not looking like that is the case, and there are no talks planned, no active talks at the moment. So it's an awkward position that Liverpool are in at the moment. But I hope he stays, because there's no doubt in his importance to the cause.
And your take on that, Caoimhe? I mean, if Liverpool, for example, were to have a replacement lined up, do you think it might be worth making that move this summer, or would you just keep him around?
I'd keep Gini. I think the job he does he doesn't always get plaudits, does he? I think I mentioned the other week, this is a Ballon d'Or nominee. He's an incredible midfielder who does such an important job for Liverpool. Similar in a way to Firmino, how he's selfless sort of. He's just in a role that, he's not getting. Wijnaldum's not getting goals and assists. And, I think someone tried to pull him up on that on Twitter, like a rival fan, saying, he's not got any goals or assists. His last assist was then. It's like, that's not what he's in the side to do. That's not his role at Liverpool. For the Netherlands, obviously, you see him, going a little bit further forward, and, he does get himself among the goals, doesn't he? But that's not what he's there to do for Liverpool. He's winning back that ball, feeding it forward. He's just that protective sort of player that, will add to the attack and defence. I think he's all round such a perfect midfielder. Obviously, if, he does want to team back up with Ronald Koeman at Barcelona, you can't exactly blame him. But, does he want to? I mean, you'd probably think that Liverpool are going to be definitely battling it out for the Premier League title next season. I think if they lost someone like Wijnaldum at this stage in the game, heading into the weekend, even over the next month, you definitely have to replace him straight away, because he's such an important player. Now, obviously, I think, all the links are sort of like, if Wijnaldum goes, Thiago then arrives, and, I'm not entirely sure that's a thing. It's just a lot of people saying it. So does it make it right? I don't know. You get a bit bored, don't you? As I always do say, but can't wait for the window to shut, really, just to end it all the speculation, just kill it now. I'd be happy to see Wijnaldum stay. Obviously, Thiago's an amazing player. I'd love to see him play in Liverpool, but whether that's going to happen, you don't really know, do you? But yeah, I think Wijnaldum's such an underrated player, and I think it'd be one of them weird moments where he leaves the club, and then you wouldn't. I know he's 29, but you wouldn't quite realise until maybe halfway through the season how much you were missing him. He's first choice for Klopp, and will he want him to go? Will he? Heck.
No, absolutely. I mean, one argument that has been put forward, Joe, is that Liverpool could do with a little bit of a refresh in their squad. They didn't spend much last summer. If they weren't to do that again this summer, could you see a situation where it gets a little bit stale? I mean, I can't personally, but there is that argument that is put forward by some people.
Look, I do think they need one or two fresh faces. Still massively think that they need, more so than in midfield, another forward, a left-sided forward as backup for Mane, just to give them another option. I mean, Origi's been there a number of seasons now. You don't need me to tell you what he's done for the club, but I just think they need something else, something different now. And that to me is the one area where I'd be looking and looking at trying to freshen up. And I think it would help. I think, we just talked about Minamino being a new sort of option for Liverpool, and him and Keita being the two. All right, Keita's not a new player, but being the two players that have come in and sort of shown something over pre-season and perhaps transformed the game a little bit for Liverpool against Arsenal in the Community Shield. But I think fresh legs and fresh faces can do that for you. So personally, I would like to see them buy somebody. And I still think they will, because I think they will sell players, not necessarily Wijnaldum, but certainly, the likes of Harry Wilson, Marko Grujic, people like that. So personally, I would like to see them sign at least one more player, maybe two. But in terms of the midfield, I don't think that needs a freshen up. I think your midfield, you've got Keita coming in who has been improving and does look a better player, and I don't think we're writing him off yet. We've got a young lad in Curtis Jones who I think everyone on this podcast and listening would rate very highly. And then you've got players that have just proven themselves time and time again. And look, it's easy to look at Thiago, isn't it, and get excited about what he could potentially bring. But to me, why would you change a midfield that has dominated the Premier League last season? Pretty much did the same thing the season before, and won a Champions League and got to 2 finals in the last 3 seasons. I suspect Wijnaldum, unless he says that I want to leave this summer, and if Barcelona do come along with an offer and he says he wants to take it, I suspect they'll keep him around, whether his contract's running down or whether he signs a new one, because Klopp does that, doesn't he? He's done that with Emre Can. He did that with Robert Lewandowski at Dortmund, and I'm pretty sure he played Mario Götze in a European Cup final against the team that he knew he was going to join. So Klopp doesn't let those sorts of things influence his team selection. So I personally think that unless Wijnaldum wants to move, he will stay and potentially leave the club on a free next summer. And Liverpool won't let it bother them. And I agree with everything Kiva said there. He's the type of player that I don't think people quite realise how good he is and how influential he is until he potentially departs. And, you're not a bad player if you play in a team that has won the things that Liverpool has won, and you're a regular. He plays at the highest level for Holland, and he plays at the highest level for Liverpool, and he's an automatic starter pretty much for both teams. So you don't do that by being a bad player. And as great as Thiago may be, to me, why twist when by sticking you've got the midfield that has won you the things that they've won? So I'd keep them around, but I do think they need fresh legs in different areas.
Yeah, Joe mentions there the front three and potentially needing a different option in that sort of position, Gorsty. I put this question to Kieran Maguire in the podcast that comes out tomorrow, and I wonder what you make of it, because I saw a theory that a few people had said that next summer each of the front three will have 2 years remaining on their contracts. A lot of fans would say, well, maybe you've got to start thinking about a succession plan. You've got to start thinking about who might come in and replace those players. Would it not make more sense then to buy someone this summer, maybe someone the summer after and the summer after that, and do it as a gradual process rather than possibly having to do a wholesale change at some point down the line?
Yeah, I can see the logic in that. The only issue would be is this summer is just a summer unlike any other, isn't it? And I see quite a lot of people moaning that isn't the case for every other team, but the exception of Chelsea and Manchester City, who haven't even spent that much necessarily, just Nathan Ake and Ferran Torres. But the exception of Chelsea, clubs are cutting their cloth accordingly, aren't they? Manchester United doesn't look like they're going to be getting Jadon Sancho purely because they don't want to pay the fee that Dortmund are asking for him because of the situation that they're in. So there is something to be said of succession planning and some careful kind of dissection and analysis. And we all know that goes on at Liverpool behind the scenes over who's going to come in and eventually replace this incredible front three. But I think for the quality of player that is needed to effectively replace any of those front three, I don't think Liverpool have got the money to be doing it this summer. So then you're looking at next summer, and obviously Liverpool will be in a much better position to know about their financial, what they can kind of spend then. So I think it's much more likely that Liverpool kind of bring in a marquee sign, if you like, in just under 12 months' time than we are over the next 4 weeks.
Yeah, in terms of players departing Liverpool then before that transfer window deadline, we've seen Sheyi Ojo join Cardiff on loan this morning, but there's plenty of others who are being linked with moves. There's 6 players that I've got on the list, so I'll give you 2 names each as we go round, and we'll start with yourself, Caoimhe, and Loris Karius. I mean, obviously a player who has not played for Liverpool for a long time. He was on the bench at the weekend. What do you think should happen next with him, and who potentially might be interested in him, do you think?
I think it's a difficult one, isn't it, with Loris? I mean, does he just sort of stick around because no one wants him and he's still got a contract at Liverpool? You kind of don't know. I don't know if Paul would know anymore on if any clubs are interested in him. I'm not too sure myself, but it's not like Klopp was testing him out again in pre-season, was it? Which you saw, after the Champions League final in 2018. He had that game at Tranmere. I think, did Liverpool maybe play another Chester or someone random like that? And he made a couple of mistakes, didn't he, in those games? It was kind of like, well, all right then, let's get him offsides for a couple of years and see what he can sort of rebuild his mental fortitude. And I think to an extent he's done that, hasn't he? Obviously, it didn't quite work out for him in Turkey, and he had to, I think, did he terminate that contract and come back? And I don't think he's going to be ahead of Adrian, is he, in the keeper stakes next season? If he does stick around, I think there's always going to be that kind of little bit of animosity between him and the fans because of the final. I mean, I'd personally tell people to let that go. The lad made a couple of bad errors, and it's something that'll never leave him for the rest of his life. Haven't we all made mistakes before? I think we have. So on a human level like that, let's just let that one go. But I think it'd be nice maybe for him to, if he can't find a club, just to stick around. But then what do Liverpool then do in terms of he's not going to be playing games? You'd think Adrian will be coming into the cup games. Obviously, we saw Alisson get injured last season. We saw Kelleher be the sort of third choice goalkeeper. Does Karius sort of go above Liverpool's young goalkeeper who they want, to get that experience rather than a keeper that they probably don't have a long-term future for? It's an interesting one. I think the best thing could be if he could part ways probably with Liverpool now, but it's not going to be the biggest problem in the world, is it, if he does stay along for what should be another exciting ride?
Yeah, still a few weeks left, of course, for him to potentially find a new club. And I suppose, Joe, you could say the same for Harry Wilson, because Liverpool have made clear they don't want to loan him again, but it doesn't look like there's too many teams prepared to pay that sort of fee at this stage.
Absolutely. I think there'll be some compromise in terms of fees for Liverpool. That they might get things over performance-related bonuses, or potentially even towards the end of the window. I think you might see. I know Liverpool don't want to loan Harry Wilson again, but I think potentially if it's a loan with a guarantee of a buy and a certain fee at the end of it, whether that defers the payment for a year, to make things a bit more attractive for buying clubs, whether they'd consider that. But Harry Wilson is a player, I think, that needs to now move on, and I know that he'd be pleased to be training with Liverpool. But look, I don't think realistically he's gonna be playing for Liverpool on a regular basis anytime soon. So I think for him, he needs to get moving on this summer and find a permanent home. And I think there are clubs. I think several clubs in the Premier League have expressed an interest, and I think if the price is right, he will be a Premier League player by the end of the window. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Liverpool wanted around 20 million. Am I right, Gorsty? But I wonder whether that will come down to, say, 15. And a bit of a compromise will be reached, because that's what it seems to be happening elsewhere. So yeah, Callum Wilson's just gone for 20 million. So that's the sort of, he's a lot more proven, isn't he, I suppose, than Harry Wilson is. So yeah, I think there'll be some compromise, but I think Harry Wilson will move on sooner rather than later.
And I suppose, Gorsty, you could put Marko Grujic in a similar sort of situation, similarly valued, similar in that they don't want to loan him this summer.
Yeah, well, there was some interesting comments from Hertha Berlin sporting director recently, wasn't there, saying they're kind of waiting to see what Liverpool want to do, but the noises coming out of the club is that Liverpool are happy to kind of listen to offers for Grujic of around similar type of fee that they were asking for Harry Wilson. He's only played 14 games for Liverpool, and that's the same amount he played in his second half loan spell at Cardiff So considering he was Jurgen Klopp's first ever signing, you'd have to say that the writing is very much on the wall for him as far as breaking into that first team goes, particularly in the position he plays, where Liverpool have got about 9 different players who can play across that middle three. So if Liverpool can get a decent fee for him, he's someone who I think will be moved on, and hopefully that can be kind of reinvested into what at the moment is a pretty much non-existent transfer budget by all accounts, isn't it? So he's someone who's in the same boat as Wilson in terms of, I think it is time for him to kind of move on and look to establish himself somewhere else, because by all accounts he has played well at Hertha Berlin while he's been there, and he did well at Cardiff. So now's the time for him to maybe become a first team regular somewhere else.
Yeah, it's a very different Liverpool squad at this stage to the one that he first arrived into. But Kiva, the next player on the list, Yasa Larucci, obviously a left-back, has been signed by Liverpool this summer. Do you think that signals the end for Larucci's time at the club?
Yeah, I think it probably does. I think there was sort of sounds coming out that he wanted to play more football, which you can't blame him for. I think who were the clubs interested? Does anyone remember? There was a couple of clubs knocking about, wasn't there?
I think Leeds might have been.
Yeah. So there's certainly interest there for him, but obviously we're in such a weird sort of time, aren't we, where clubs aren't necessarily wanting to spend money that maybe Liverpool want for, what looks to be a talented player, but one that, Jurgen Klopp doesn't entirely trust to be that sort of backup left back. So obviously he's brought in Costas instead. You'd likely see that. I think they do sort of want to make a little bit of money, don't they, Liverpool, in terms of what's happening in the world, but whether they will be able to do that, I don't know. The few times I saw Yasa Larucci, I was always impressed with him. I think he's a really, really fast player. Attacking wise, I think he's well equipped. In terms of maybe defensive, he probably needs to improve on that, but I'm sure Liverpool, transformed him into a left back, didn't he? I think he was more of a forward when he came to Liverpool. So, I think he's got a bright future in the game, but it's one he's going to have to forge out for himself, which is always an honest thing to see young players to say, "Oh, it's not going to happen for me here. I need to go somewhere else and get those minutes." And you can't blame him really, because these are the key years of his development. But whether Liverpool get whatever asking price they're looking at, I'm not too sure about that. But is it where you loan them out again? I'm not too sure. I think Liverpool are wanting certain players off the books, and it feels like Yasa Larucci himself wants to move on. So I think you thought maybe a deal would have happened sooner, but no deals are really happening, are they? So it's such a weird time.
Yeah, it's a straight time as well, Joe, for Ben Woodburn, obviously a player that's been on Liverpool's books for some time now. Still a very talented young player, but I suppose at the very least, another loan would be the best thing for him.
At the very least, yeah. I think, how old's Ben Woodburn now? 21. I was there that night at Anfield when he scored and became the youngest goal scorer against Leeds. And you expected big things, but I think physically it was always going to be difficult for him because of the position he played, and he was a shorter lad, wasn't he? And it just hasn't really, he hasn't really kicked on the way that he'd like. He's had a lot of injuries, which has been difficult for him. And I think, again, he's just someone that needs to find a regular home in regular football, at least a championship loan for him. And if he can prove himself there, then potentially Liverpool could look again next summer. But I think he will eventually depart the club, and if Liverpool can get 5 or 6 million for him, I think that'd be good business. But it's difficult. I think we'll see a lot of movement at the very end of the window. I think once teams sort of know where they're at, and once a couple of games of Premier League football have been played, and if someone's lost 2 games, they might suddenly scramble in the market, and then that will get things moving. So I think the last week of the window could be quite mad. So nobody book any holidays for them.
The last player on the list then, Ghosty, Nat Phillips, is another one who really should probably move on from Liverpool for the best of his career, and I suppose there'll be a couple of teams interested in him as well.
Yeah, I think it's a Bristol City who's interested in Nat Phillips. I know Doyle did the piece last week. Yeah, he's someone who seemed to have a good season in the Bundesliga 2 last season. Obviously, at that kind of mid-season kind of jaunt back to Liverpool, didn't he, and beat Everton and then got straight back off, which was a bit of a strange one. But yeah, I mean, he's someone who will be a decent, solid, good defender for years to come. But I just question whether he is at the required level to be a regular in a Liverpool team, or even a fourth choice. I think if Liverpool can get an acceptable fee for him, he's another one who will be kind of lessening the books.
Yeah, definitely. Thing to watch out for. Last but not least then, no scores to predict until Friday, but the PFA Player of the Year awards do take place tomorrow evening. I'm pretty sure we all agree that Trent Alexander-Arnold will win the Young Player of the Year, but for the main prize, I'm going to go round each of you and ask just very quickly which player you think should win. Obviously, Raheem Sterling and Kevin De Bruyne joining Van Dijk, Mane, Henderson and Trent Alexander-Arnold on the shortlist. Gorsty, we will start with you first. Who do you think is going to win?
I think it's going to. I think they might end up giving it to Kevin De Bruyne, if I'm honest. I think out of Liverpool, I think maybe Henderson and Mane have got the biggest chances. Trent surely got to issue in for the young player. What was it, 13 assists last season in a team that was the best defence in the Premier League as well. So fantastic output from him. I'd love to see Henderson win it, obviously, but I think he's had quite a lot of recognition lately, hasn't he? He got the Football Writers Award, of course, and so on. I think the powers that be might just give this one to Kevin De Bruyne.
Yeah, Kevin De Bruyne would be my pick. Joe, who are you going to go for?
I think Kevin De Bruyne will win it. I think it'll be between Trent and Rashford for the young player. I think Rashford might sneak that one. I'd give it to Henderson. First of all, just because it would be great. I think he deserves it. I think his work, both on and off the pitch, mean that he deserves it. He's led Liverpool to the first title in 30 years. That's quite a big achievement. I think we'll all agree. And he's been inspirational, and he's just done some fantastic work off the pitch during lockdown, obviously with the NHS. So I hope those sorts of things are considered. I think quite often it's not just the things that they do on the pitch, but the whole story around the player that's considered. I think that was the case when Ryan Giggs won it some years ago. So I'd go for Henderson. Also, it'd be a nice little bit of fume, wouldn't it? Because I don't know why, but people really put a lot of thought into these things, and I always kind of think the PFA Player of the Year is nice, but I don't really understand why Man City fans, well, the ones that I've seen online tweeting about it, not all Man City fans obviously, have been so annoyed that Salah won it 2 years ago and Van Dijk won it last year. I mean, they won the Premier League, so who cares? But Liverpool won the Premier League this time around, and Henderson just to up the fume a little bit. It always makes things fun, doesn't it?
And Kiva, your pick for the PFA's main award?
Yeah, it'd be hard saying Henderson, but I think like the lads have and yourself, Matt, have kind of got an inkling Kevin De Bruyne will nick it. He had a sensational season, but for me, you've got to give it to Henderson just for the sort of, I don't know, it's a feeling, isn't it, football? It's not always, goals and assists, which Henderson did provide last season as well. But, just to rally Liverpool to that, it was a ruthless campaign, wasn't it? And just sensational from the captain. His story, I think, is just one to believe in, isn't it? Someone, from a complete underdog being almost going to Fulham to, wanting to stick around and then becoming now, in folklore of Liverpool. He's a legend of the club, isn't he? So I'd love to see him lift that ball. I think Salah got it right, didn't he? A couple of seasons. Last season was it when after he'd won it the year before, he said to Van Dijk, "Well, watch out because you probably won't win it again now." Which is right because once you set that level, then you're not going to win it. And Van Dijk really, come on, he's a monster. Like he should be winning it as well, but Mane had such a good season. Salah maybe dropped off a little bit, but he still got a hell of a lot of goals. So you think, justice will out here, and Henderson will get his award and be in a nice tuxedo. And it's quite a large award, that, isn't it? It's always nice pictures of it because it's just so big. I'd be very shocked if Trent Alexander-Arnold doesn't win the young player. I just can't see it going to anyone else. He's a phenomenal player, isn't he? And I mean, in reality, he'd be winning the big award in the not so near future, I think.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see both of the award winners. And of course, we'll have all of the coverage across the Liverpool Echo website and Blood Red tomorrow night. We'll also be back with a preview of the new season, including a look ahead to the game with Leeds United at the weekend in Friday's Blood Red podcast. But from myself, Matt Addison, Paul Gorst, Joe Rimmer and Caoimhe O'Neill, until next time on the Blood Red channel, it's goodbye for now.